Spring's here. I'm back at it. Got some new tires mounted on the rims, and a buddy of mine told me, you know what, I'd really appreciate it if you film that thing because he's a little apprehensive to take his wheels off and whatnot. So I'm going to show you how to put the wheels back on. I already took them off. I had the tires mounted, and that's what I'm going to do in this video. So, well, here are the wheels. Got Dunlop American Elite. I've been using the Michelin Commander 2s. Last two sets I got 12,800 miles out of the Michelin Commander 2s. But reading up, the Dunlop American Elite supposedly get you better traction in wet weather. So I thought I'd give those a try. Of course, you know, redid the motor, everything's chucking and jiving. As I said, I took this thing apart already with the wheels. I've got the front kind of sitting there on that front fork. It's a little bit precarious, but I've got a little jack there just perfectly in the middle, so it's kind of balancing the weight out. And then, you know, I'm gonna go ahead and videotape and show you how to get these tires in. So let me just walk around the bike and we'll get it all hooked up and go from there. All right, well, a couple of things to check before you mount your wheel. I just got this back from the shop, and of course they mounted it for me, balanced it and whatnot. I want to make sure that the magnets that they put on for the balance are on there properly. I've gotten them back before and they're not. Before I took the wheel in, I cleaned it with brake fluid, or brake cleaner rather. Did a pretty good job on that to make sure that, you know, wherever they mounted the deals, they were going to be balanced. In here is just kind of a shock grommet on a Harley. It goes in, it's pretty simple. Another thing to check is your bearings. On a Harley, I've been through a couple of sets of bearings, and I've noticed that, first of all, you better check and make sure that you can turn them by hand. What happens at the Harley shops, they'll often put these bearings in with a press, and they put them in too far and then they don't turn. And you're gonna cook them if that's the case. So double check, make sure they do turn. You really wanna make sure that they don't put them in too far with a press, and oftentimes it's better to pound them in. Relative to this, I'm gonna pop it in. It's really just more of a shock ordeal that is intended to make sure that the bike shifts and everything is proper. There you go. All right, so that's the idea. Your belt drive's gonna connect, and this is gonna fit inside those. Easy enough. To get the tire in, I'm not going to put this on right yet. I'm going to go ahead and take this off and then put it in on the other side. A little light on the situation. Easy enough. It's coming up. All right. I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to go ahead and put that belt back on, and then we're going to worry about putting the axle in. We're on the other side of the bike. Gonna put the belt wheel on. I've got the wheel inside of there. Best to roll it back, get it in that order so that you can slide it on. It's pretty easy to do, no real right or wrong. You can see it's on there. Now I can roll the wheel forward. I'm going to worry about putting the belt around the deal. And this is something we'll focus on later, but belt deflection is what we'll talk about. All right, so now that the belt's on, the wheel's in order, need to go around to the other side and work on putting on the brake caliper. Once that's in order, I'm gonna try and lower the bike so that I can line up the axle with the actual shaft and everything else. So let's switch to the other side. On the other side of the bike here, we have the caliber. It's got the axle shaft, and of course I already cleaned this out with some brake cleaner. This one piece of metal is going to slide on this area over here. We got to finagle it in. We also have the speed sensor. The speed sensor is going to go on the inside, drop down. I'll just leave it hanging there for the minute. In the meantime, I'm trying to make sure my brake line and everything's not compromised. I know that this has got to, the caliber's got to go on, and it's a little bit tricky to kind of get it all together here, but we got that. So I've lowered the wheel and I've gotten the caliber over the likes of the rotor, and now I'm going to put my speed sensor in between the caliber and the rotor. All right, I like it. We're in order to go ahead and work on the axle. So I'm gonna roll around to the other side here. Concerning the axle, this spacer is gonna need to go in between the frame and the actual belt drive flywheel. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that I can get enough space, jockey the wheel, get the spacer in, slide the axle bolt over, and I'll wrestle with that a bit. All right, ready to wrestle this one in. One note, when putting this back on, tires are gonna have a little arrow indicating direction. It's quite helpful. The arrow is actually pointing that way, which means I've got to turn around. So therefore I know which way and which rotor goes on which. It's gonna actually rotate forward, right? So that's that. Another note, I took off the one caliber when I actually took the tire off, because we have rotors on each side. You can't really deal with it, so you got to at least take one off. I did spray brake cleaner on both my calibers and rotors and the brake pads, and cleaned everything up pretty well. This thing's ready to be wrestled in here. The brake pads are far enough apart. Normally it'd be a good time to change the brake pads, but I just did this the brake pads on this thing last year, so it's good to go. I'll jockey it into position, get it up into the fender, so you don't need to take off the fender. right in. I like it. Now that that's in there, I've got the rotor on this side. Okay, it's in the brake pads. That's good. That's what you want to do. Now it's time to lower this thing just a little bit, and then go ahead and attach the other brake pad. So when I say lower it a little bit, I'm trying to line up the axle height-wise, right? So let me lower that thing. Slowly, of course. I just use a drill on my lift. I'm going to double check, make sure we're rocking and rolling, not compromising anything. I like it. All right. So now might be a good time to mess with the rotor, or we can go ahead and mess with the actual axle. Last year I did go ahead and replace this axle. I found that it had the slight bow to it, and that annoyed me, so I thought I'd get a new one, and I did. There's a spacer and a grommet that goes in between there, and then we have the speed sensor on the other side. I'm going to set up the camera and a different angle so that you can see all the pieces, how everything goes back together. See if we can lower this thing a little bit more. Let's lower the actual bike a little bit more. Get closer to being aligned with the axle itself. Put my finger through, go a little bit further. That might be the ticket. Do a dry fit. I think it's come down just a little bit more. Good. All right, so regarding the axle, here's the one spacer that's going to go in on this side. I'm going to get it in here, line it up. Just start the axle over a little bit. Come over to the other side. And make sure the speed sensor is in place. Move the camera over. Here's the speed sensor. It's going to go in between the axle. You got plenty of grease in here because, you know, I've blown these bearings before, and I'm a little obsessive about that. All right, adjust the wheel. I like it. Let's tap over the axle. Just coming through. Got a feeling I'm gonna need to. Oh, it's popping right through. All right, I'm at a bad angle. Got to move your camera. Shouldn't really have to pound it too hard, so it's just an alignment factor, so I want to get it lined up better. I got a feeling I'm going to need to lower it just a smidgen. Yeah, that did the ticket. All right, so we've lowered it. We've got the washer that's going to go on the outside. And we've got the nut. It's that simple. I'm going to clean off that nut, and I'm going to use some blue Loctite on the end of it. You don't really need it, but it doesn't hurt. So that'll be one thing I'll work on here right quick. Looking for for a good rag, clean the grease off. Then we have the locking pin on the other side. The locking pin really locks everything in, therefore, that's why you don't need the blue Loctite, but we'll put that locking pin in. That too, I'm gonna put a little blue Loctite on. So, I'll go ahead and clean this off. Get some blue Loctite out. Get the washer on. Blue Loctite. Just gonna hand tight this guy. Gonna put the locking pin in right here, okay? So I'll put a little blue Loctite on that guy. Snug it up. Good. Now we're going to put the caliper back on. Bungee cord it to the side here. Just keep it up out of the way. Pads are all separated, been cleaned. He's up there. All lined up. More blue Loctite on these guys. They're 10mm stars. Get it started. Bottom one. All right. There's that. Let's use my drill. All right. I'm gonna snug them up. All right, then I'm going to come back and tighten up the axle nut. And that's how you do the front tire.